So picture this. The Roman Empire, this massive continent-spanning superpower, has collapsed. It's gone. And what's left behind is this chaotic patchwork of kingdoms, warlords, and all sorts of different local beliefs. And yet, out of all that chaos, one single faith would rise up and basically define Europe for the next 1,000 years. So let's get into it. How did Christianity not just survive the fall of Rome, but actually go on to conquer a continent?
Right, so this is the big question for our explainer today. How did this actually happen? Because believe me, it was no accident. It was the result of a really powerful organization, a brilliant strategy, and, a very convenient partnership between popes and kings. Let's break it down.
So what was the engine behind this massive expansion? Well, it really came down to one institution that stood in stark contrast to all the political chaos of the time: the highly organized Catholic Church.
See, the church's real power, its secret weapon, was its structure. At the very top, you had the Pope in Rome, seen as the successor to the Apostle Peter. Then, below him, you've got bishops who are in charge of entire regions. And then under them, you have the local priests running the churches in every single town and village. This perfect top-down chain of command meant the church could act with one unified purpose across a totally fractured continent.
Okay, so you have this powerful church, and you have these powerful kings. How did they actually interact? How did they get along? Well, this relationship would literally come to define the Middle Ages. Way back in the 5th century, Pope Gelasius came up with this idea that became known as the Two Swords Doctrine. And the concept was pretty simple. The church holds the spiritual sword, it handles everything to do with faith, and the kings, they hold the secular sword. They manage government, law, and justice. Now, they were supposed to stay in their own lanes, but, well, in reality, they worked together a lot. Both of them were aiming for the same goal: a stable, unified, and completely Christian Europe. So, how did the church actually go about spreading its faith across all these different kingdoms? I mean, converting people one by one would take forever. They needed a much smarter, more efficient strategy.
And this is where the missionaries come in. These were dedicated clerics, the real boots on the ground. A lot of them actually traveled from places that had just become Christian, like Britain and Ireland, and they ventured deep into what they called pagan lands on the European mainland. Their whole goal? To convert entire peoples to the faith.
And their strategy? Oh, it was brilliant and incredibly effective. Missionaries didn't waste their time trying to convince every single farmer or blacksmith. Nope, they went straight to the top. Their target was the local king or the chieftain. They understood a very simple truth of human nature. If you can win over the ruler, the people, they will almost always follow. And this created the ultimate win-win scenario. Think about it. For the church, they get thousands of new followers overnight, plus the military protection of that king's army. And what does the king get in return? Oh, just the ultimate seal of approval: divine legitimacy. His right to rule wasn't just because he was strong, it was because God himself wanted him on the throne. And that is a powerful, powerful tool for unifying your people and crushing any opposition. But, it wasn't always about friendly persuasion. For really powerful rulers like Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, conversion was also a tool of conquest. After he defeated groups like the Saxons in battle, he would often force them to accept baptism. It basically became a condition of their surrender. This was, quite literally, conversion by the sword.
So we've talked about the popes and kings, the big power players. But there was another force at work, something much quieter, but maybe even more important. A force that was busy preserving the very foundations of civilization: the monasteries. The guiding principle for these places was a simple Latin phrase: ora et labora, which means pray and work. Monks and nuns basically checked out of the chaotic world outside to live in these communities, governed by really strict rules, dedicating their entire lives to God. And from behind those stone walls, their work would end up changing the course of history.
Honestly, you can think of them as the Google of the Middle Ages. I'm serious. In a time when almost everyone was illiterate, and that includes a lot of kings and nobles, monasteries became the only real centers for knowledge and learning. They were the original search engines. So what were they actually doing in there? Well, for one, monks spent countless hours painstakingly copying texts by hand. They preserved not just the Bible, but also the great works of ancient Greece and Rome that would have just disappeared otherwise. Rulers like Charlemagne partnered with them to set up schools, which sparked a whole cultural revival. And because of all this, monasteries became incredibly wealthy, powerful, and were seen as these essential islands of stability in a really volatile world. All right, so fast forward a few centuries. After all this work by missionaries, kings, and monks, Christianity had, for the most part, won. But as it turns out, creating a unified Christendom also created a whole new set of challenges.
By about the year 1000, you could pretty much look at a map of Europe, from Ireland all the way over to Poland, and say, yep, it's Christian. It was a remarkable, truly incredible transformation from the fragmented world that existed back in 500 AD.
But, and this is a big but, this new Christian Europe was far from a perfect, unified monolith. Not at all. On the ground level, a lot of the old pagan traditions stuck around for centuries, often just blending in with the new faith. From the outside, the continent was under constant attack from groups like the Vikings, and maybe most damaging of all, a massive crack was forming within the faith itself, a growing divide between the Church in Rome and the Eastern Church in Constantinople that would eventually tear Christianity in two. And that really leaves us with this final thought, doesn't it? Was the Christianization of Europe this incredible spiritual triumph, a unifying faith that brought order out of total chaos? Or was it mainly a brilliant tool of political power, used by ambitious popes and kings to build their own empires? The truth, as is so often the case, is probably somewhere right there in the middle. So, what do you think was the most important factor here? Was it the missionaries, the kings, the monasteries? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. And hey, if you found this explainer helpful, you know the drill. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. Thanks for watching.